I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Today, here for you to review Freelance Whales' Diluvia. This is the second album from Freelance Whales. Our dear friend Brandon Kester, actually a couple years ago, requested us review their first album, Weathervanes, which we both really, really liked.
Yeah, kind of came as a surprise.
Very much so. I mean, this is an indie pop band that kind of takes a progressive stance on how they like orchestrate their music and most importantly, plan out their albums. Weathervanes was exceptional when it came to a straight-through album listen. You could tell that it was handcrafted and designed to be an album listen.
But so many highlights at the same time.
Yeah.
Just killer songs on that album.
And when you get that combination of great album flow and still have like single track highlights, that really, I mean, you can't really ask for much more than that. I mean, that's the definition of a good album. Good songs, good album flow, that's a good album. I mean, that's what we're looking for. So, you know, while this sound that Freelance Whales have may not trip everyone's trigger. You know, it's a little bright and poppy and kind of upbeat and
almost some elements of like that Owl City Postal Service kind of thing, but they mix it with a lot of like Sufjan Stevens style banjo.
Absolutely.
And here they switch it up a little bit actually from Weathervanes.
I won't say totally. I think that they do make a significant change in their sound.
Yeah.
And I'd say it's more towards a direction that I have a little hesitation in getting behind. It's you know, more of that new wave sort of synth-driven sound.
Very 80s synth kind of sounds.
You know, School of Seven Bells comes to mind in thinking about, you know, the direction that they went with it. Now, I don't necessarily think that it's that bad of it because I think that they pull it off. I think that they do a very good job.
I think they pull it off because the songwriting's solid.
Absolutely.
When it comes down to it, the way you present your music, the style that you choose, and the instrumentation and the production, all of that has got to be secondary to whether your songwriting is good. And at first, I didn't like this album much because it was hard to get past that sound. It was a barrier for me because I thought, it's 2012, why are you using these thick, cheap synth sounds? But then once I understood the songwriting behind it, and I just fell in love with a lot of the melodies, the way that they constructed these songs, it was really, really good to me.
Right. And I mean, how many bands out there can say that they mix banjo and synths?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Really,
the instrumental palette is very unique.
Yeah, and they pull it off. The vocals, I felt, were exceptionally good on this album. There are a lot of just solid hooks and big climaxes in multiple tracks. You know, I mentioned to Tom, you know, last week, I think, I mentioned to you about how they must have listened to a ton of Youth Lagoon because, like, these songs just have these big builds to them, and you know, that was, you know, Youth Lagoon's, you know, big thing last year.
Well, and in similar fashion, they're trying to strike that very powerful emotional chord. And that's a fine line because you can tell that they're shooting for it, and a lot of the times when that's most effective is when it comes naturally, when you almost don't have to try it. Here I feel like they're forcing it a little bit, but it still comes off as natural. And maybe some of that is because of that instrumentation, you know, the stuff that we talked about. But it really has a good effect on me as a listener. And in contrast to Weathervanes, I still think they were able to achieve that on a lot of tracks in Weathervanes. But Weathervanes had so much more of a bright pop sheen to it.
This is a little darker.
It is darker. It's a little moodier. They focus so much more on atmosphere.
Yes, they do.
What's happening in the backdrop, just kind of underneath the mix.
And the lyrics get a lot more quirky. They dealt with some strange lyrics on the first album. You know, they had a song about ghosts, and I remember, you know, just getting into those lyrics, and I had to look up to some of the lyrics. I think on DNA Bank on track 10.
That's very lyrically driven.
And you know, the lyrics didn't make that much sense to me, but you know, just the fact that their lyrics made me listen closer to the music. Lyrics are a device that musicians use to get you to pay attention to their music. So in effect, it worked. It was great. You know, and I gotta say, the track follow through, track 3, one of my favorite tracks this year.
Same here. I totally agree.
I can't get over how much I love that track.
Yep, it's stuck in my head all the time. It's got a gorgeous kind of end section that it grows into and then develops even further from there. Check that one out if anything. What's funny too is that's actually one that I ended up not liking at first because of that portrayal of the synth in the beginning. Once you get past that though, and I think if you're able to get past that, you'll love this. You know, it's that way for me with actually a lot of music that's presented in this vein.
M83?
Yeah, M83, and even going back to the 80s when that sound was becoming popular. One of my favorite albums of all time, Peter Gabriel's So, actually just released the special edition 25th anniversary of that album recently. I actually already have it on vinyl, but I should get that if it's not out. But
Christmas present.
Yeah, there you go. But I mean, that album, I hated it at first because of the way the songs were portrayed.
Right.
That 80s sound, the kind of fake drum sound and the synths and everything. But once you pay attention to what the artists are actually doing behind the scenes and the way they're constructing the songs, I think that you will change your mind as long as you can get past that eventually.
What do you want to give this one, Tom?
I'm going to give this an 83. I really ended up liking it.
Fair enough. I think I like it just a slight bit less than you, just very slightly. And I think the reason is I had a harder time connecting with the songs on the back half of the album. Really, tracks 1 through 6, I really felt like I connected with. You know, I'm only picking 3 tracks on this album, but really, if I had to, I'd pick all 6.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the last like 5 tracks are still good. Don't get me wrong. And when I was really detailed listening to them and picking them apart, I still found that they were very well written and served to close the album nicely. However, I just didn't attach with them quite as much.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I want to expand a little bit on my score as an 83. Looking at this, if I just focused on the high points, the like 5 or 6 really good tracks on this album, I would give this around like a 90 because those blow me away. But I think there were some significant weak parts. I got to point out track 5, Locked Out, track 7, Red Star, track 9, Then Nothing. Those kind of brought it down for me a little bit. I'd probably give those around like a 70 or so. So averaging it out, 83 is where I land, but I think that's the biggest thing holding this back from even being higher than that is just a little bit of inconsistency.
Yeah, and to me it's just not quite the same album listen that Weathervanes was.
Yeah.
So I still think I wouldn't call this a sophomore slump. I still think it's a very good album, and definitely recommend it to you guys. I'm going 80 on this one. But you know, if I had to pick between the two, I'd pick Weathervanes. But this is still very good. I really enjoyed listening to this one. What did you guys think? Have you heard of Freelance Whales? Is this a band you're familiar with? If so, if not, go check them out. If so, leave us a comment telling us what you liked about this album and which album's your favorite at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. You guys rock at contributing to what Velocities and Music is trying to do, and it means a lot to us, and your participation definitely makes VIMTV what it is. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
Do you